Right, good evening, fans, and welcome to another episode of the Blues Brothers podcast with me, George Harris, my fellow Blue, as you, Charlie Patrick. And on the Star 7 lineup, we have a very special guest for you this evening. She's a former Chelsea and Real Madrid presenter and works for the Premier League TV presenter and reporter. I'm delighted to welcome Aljoe to the show. Alex, are you? And bit of a related question to start with, but how was the Cheltenham Festival? Because I know we communicated before. Do you have any inside information with the industry that you're in?
Hi, great to be on the show, guys. Thanks for having me on. Cheltenham. Yeah, I didn't expect you to ask me about Cheltenham. It's actually my first time there. Back 2 winners. So pretty cool.
Love it.
A lot of people, but the sun was shining, and have you been?
I have. I live very close to Cheltenham, actually. So I didn't manage to go this year, and I think the year before it didn't happen. But no, so it's always a great occasion. And how was Ed Sheeran last night as well? So I saw on your Instagram that you saw a very private Sheeran. So that sounds great.
Ed Sheeran last night, absolutely amazing. He's sort of practicing for his stadium tour, which is coming up in the summer. So it was at the Electric Ballroom in Camden, just 1,000 people there. So he was testing it out. Yeah. Things he said he was rusty, but it was amazing. Brilliant. So what?
It did look great. Very interesting to see that for Ed Sheeran and the like. So, Alex, I want to start by asking you a brief question for people who don't know, following the show about your back. Could you just give us a little bit of detail how you got into position you're in and how that came about?
Yeah, so it all started really when I was at university. I studied Spanish Italian at Durham. So third year you go abroad. You choose to work or study. And I was desperate to work at Real Madrid, but I didn't really know what to do. I said, I'll do anything. I'll mop the floors at the training ground. Just kept firing them emails. They eventually got back to me and they were like, what about television? Have you ever thought about a career in television? And I think they just wanted to post my email off to the TV channel. And I thought, yeah, why not? I've always sort of liked the idea of it. I've had zero experience. So I was in talks with TV and nothing was confirmed, and I had to get out. It was set already. All my friends had already dated. But I was just holding out the hope. Like, eventually they're applying. So I just got on a flight to Madrid, called the guy, I said, look, I'm here. Please, can I just come and meet you at least? And we can talk. Anyway, so once I was there, met him, they gave me just shadowing. So there were 2 presenters, I think 3 presenters actually, working on the English service for Madrid TV. Turned out in the January, one of the girls left. Kay Murray, she went off to work in Miami. And they said to me, Alex, we'll give you a contract now until the end of the season, and you can go on screen and you can interview the players and you can do everything you've learned. I just thought, what? How can I do that? I have no idea what I'm doing. I've got zero experience. Do you want it or not? Sign here if you want to do it. Okay, fine. So signed a contract with them. I often tell the story. My first interview was with Cristiano Ronaldo, and I'd never done a player interview before. And I was stood outside the dressing room, and they said, okay, well, he scored a perfect hat trick that night. They said, you've got to get Cristiano. And unlike the Premier League, where we're actually given players and they have to come to us within 20 minutes of the game finishing, it was very different out there. It was like, give it a shot, ask if you want to, see what happens. But they said, yeah, really important you speak to him tonight. He was one of the few English speakers as well. And I just sort of started shaking. Like, how can I interview Cristiano Ronaldo when I've never even done an interview before? And I remember so clearly one of the girls saying to me, if you crack under pressure now, then you're not cut out for a career in journalism, because you've got to be ballsy, you've got to go for it. And so I did. So he came up, I was, Cristiano, can I ask you a couple of questions? And he was he's a true professional. And even though I could barely string a sentence together, and watching it back now is it's so cringing, because it's sort of, Cristiano, a perfect hat trick tonight. There were no questions. But what an amazing experience to think that was sort of where it all begun. So came back from Madrid, finished my degree, and started Chelsea TV while I was doing a master's at City University. TV journalism masters, and then a year later they called me. Real Madrid called me again and said, "Do you want to come back?" And I was there until 2019, which is when I got my job at Premier League Productions. So that's a very brief sum up of my career so far. But living out in Madrid was absolutely unbelievable. I was there for the 3 Champions Leagues in a row with Zidane when he arrived in January 2016. And traveling with them everywhere, going on tours with them. So many pinch myself moments in these, like flying on their private jets and things. Like, what is this? What am I doing? But it was amazing. And a great place to learn as well, because everyone watching Real Madrid TV adores Real Madrid. So it's a kind audience, I'd say. Very few trolls. And actually, touch wood, but up until this point, I have never experienced anything negative or bad. And I think the Premier League audience is great as well. Everyone loves the Premier League. Maybe it's football in general. Everyone loves football. And so I think up until this point, I've been very lucky and worked at some great places.
I mean, you started at Real Madrid. I mean, what's it like being part of such a massive global institution? Because it's not just any football club. It's arguably like the most attractive, the most glamorous, the one that, alongside probably Barcelona, that everyone wants to play for. I mean, what's it like being in and around it on a daily basis? You've got superstars everywhere, from managers to players. I mean, does it feel a little bit surreal when you're sort of part of that?
Absolutely, Charlie. There's so much pressure because winning is the only option for them, basically. They don't want to draw. Of course, they don't want to lose. And when you're presenting on the club channel as well, so say there's a big derby defeat, we still have to present the show the next day or on the day of the show. But I mean, directions came from above. The president would tell us we weren't allowed to say the word Atletico, or we weren't allowed to say the word Barcelona. There were specific colors we weren't allowed to wear. If they did lose, they would say maybe 2-3 minutes on the game, and then we're immediately looking ahead to the next game. Immediately we're talking about the next game. That game didn't happen. That never happened. And I think it is sometimes actually hard as a journalist when you're trying to give good coverage and you need to talk about things, or they'll say, go big on the penalty decision. That's all we're going to talk about. We were cheated. We were robbed. We're going to talk about that moment in the 20th minute, whatever. And it's hard because maybe Real Madrid did deserve to lose that day. And we need to talk about how they were outplayed by Barcelona or outplayed by Atletico Madrid. But I'm given directions telling me, Alex, enough, that's enough. We move on now, we move on. But I think, it's all part of being a part of this massive club, as you say, like Real Madrid. And there is a lot of pressure. And day to day at Valdebebas, where they train at the... it's right by the airport. I don't know if you've seen photos. It's absolutely unbelievable. But there's so much pressure. And I remember Hazard signing. When he signed, I was there and did his first interview. And he looked at me and he was sort of like, it was weird. He said to me, like, is this a good decision? Am I going to like it here? And I said, yeah, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. It's an amazing city. I sort of focused on the city. He said, Madrid is an amazing city. He was like, it's not too hot, though. It's not too hot. I said, I'm sure you'll be all right. You're going to have a swimming pool in the summer. It is top, but I'm sure he's all right. But yeah, that hasn't, obviously, that move didn't go to plan. I should have told him, don't. But no, it was an amazing experience working at Real Madrid. But yeah, a huge amount of pressure. Actually, when I was at Chelsea.
I mean, obviously, is there any sort of split allegiances when obviously Chelsea, Real Madrid last season, Champions League, and now obviously this season again? Are you like Chelsea for all the way for it, or is there a little part of you that has a bit of an affinity for Real Madrid from your working time there? Is that quite difficult for you when those matches come up?
No, it's cool. I'm so excited that I'm coming out to Madrid on the 10th of April for the game on the 12th, back to the Bernabeu, which is, by the way, is mid, because obviously they played at the Alfredo Di Stefano, didn't they, last season? So not quite the same thing, I think, even though it's not maximum capacity at the moment because they're refurbing it. But still playing in the Bernabeu, it's a totally different experience for those Chelsea players. But yeah, obviously it's been Chelsea since birth. I was told my blood was blue when I was born, and my father would disown me if I supported Real Madrid in the Champions League. But I guess if Chelsea are to get beaten, not saying they're going to get beaten, but if they were to get beaten, better to be beaten by a Real Madrid than than another side. Then let's say Manchester City or Liverpool.
And how do you feel Chelsea's chances are of the Champions League this season? Because I listened to TalkSport very, very regularly, and they were saying that, you know, we almost relish and enjoy being the underdogs, and with everything going on in the backgrounds that we all know about, it almost spurs Chelsea on a little bit, and then it seemed a bit of a repeat of what happened last time we managed to lift it. So do you anticipate this to be? I know you said it's going to be a totally fair being inside the Bernabeu course, but do you think that Chelsea could somehow this again?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? On our programme on Monday, we're talking about Liverpool, we're talking about Manchester City. Got to the very end, I think it was the last sort of 5 minutes of the show. And a co-host said, hold on a sec, we haven't actually spoken about Chelsea. And it was a 1 hour show. All our shows are a 1 hour Premier League today. And which is crazy. But I think, as you say, George, maybe that will suit Chelsea, sort of quietly going about their business. I think no one expected them to get to the Champions League final, let alone win it, did they, last season? But I think they have a very good chance. I think they probably would have preferred to get a side like Real Madrid. I know it sounds crazy saying they'd have preferred to get Real Madrid. Karim Benzema's injured as well, which is a massive blow for them. And what an achievement it would be for Thomas Tuchel, because it would be his third successive Champions League final as well. So that'd be unbelievable. But yeah, long way to go. But who knows? Who knows? Never say never. Let's get out to Paris.
I mean, in terms of obviously Chelsea this season, I mean, it's been an interesting season. It always is, you know, plenty going on off the pitch, on the pitch as well. There never seems to be a dull day when you follow Chelsea. What have you made of the season as a whole so far? I mean, obviously now we're into the March international break, we're coming into the business end of the season. We're in the FA Cup semi-finals, Champions League quarterfinals that we just touched on. And we've obviously won the Club World Cup for the first time in the club's history. Has this season kind of lived up to your expectations, or were you expecting better, worse, kind of at the start of the campaign?
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? I remember being stood there at the start of the season, Romelu Lukaku coming back, £97.5 million club record signing. And I think that's been a bit of a, well, we know it's been a bit of a disappointment, the Romelu Lukaku situation. And actually, had he been scoring a lot more goals, where could Chelsea be now? And also with the injuries, I think, if you think Reece James, had we had Reece James fit for the whole season, had we had Ben Chilwell fit for the whole season, we could be a lot higher up that table. But yeah, I think it's the under the radar, as you mentioned, George. Yeah, I think they're just quietly going about their business. I think, who knows, we could win the FA Cup final. Then we're obviously we're not in a top 4 fight. We're not in that top 4 battle either, are we? So yeah, it still could be a very, very good season for Chelsea. And as I say, Club World Cup as well. It's not easy to win the Club World Cup. You have to win the Champions League to win the Club World Cup. And I think that was one of the trophies that they really wanted, wasn't it? Because they didn't win it back in, was it
2012? Yeah, lost to Corinthians, where Rafa did us no favours there, unfortunately. I mean, I would obviously disappointing to lose the League Cup final on the penalties, but I would have rather lost that than lost the Club World Cup, because you say it's just so hard to get to, and you know you don't get that opportunity to play in it every season like you do League Cup, domestic cups. Sort of, what are your expectations for the rest of the season? Then, obviously, you touched on Champions League as a possibility. It's going to be difficult. Real Madrid, probably looking at Manchester City, and then potentially Liverpool or Bayern Munich in the final if we were to get that far. That's a big ask. But Crystal Palace in the FA Cup semi-final, that's favourable. Obviously, Palace are doing well. Vieira's got them playing very well. Got some great young...
can't play.
Yeah, well, that was going to be one of my questions. What are your... I know, obviously, like they know that before the season starts out, and Palace are going to be aware that there's a chance that they could get to a latter stage of a cup competition, could get Chelsea, and then that situation arises. I mean, what are your thoughts on loan players not being allowed to play against their parent clubs, particularly in such a big occasion like this? You know, Tuchel will want to look at Gallagher next season. I mean, what better opportunity than an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley to showcase what he can do on the big stage?
Exactly, and he can make all the difference, couldn't he, for Crystal Palace as well? But obviously, rules are rules. but another player I actually wanted to talk about, Palace players, is Gahey. And I don't know what you guys think, but do you think we should have kept hold of him? Maybe they're talking about him about a future Palace captain.
Well, he has been captaining them a little bit this season. I've obviously been called up to the England squad as well. The thing is, though, he'd never played for Chelsea a senior appearance, and to come from the academy, get £20 million for someone that's not kicked a ball for the first team. Was he going to play this season, if we're being honest? Thiago Silva, Rudiger, Christensen, Chalobah, Aspilicueta filling in. He wasn't going to play, but now you look at him and how well he's doing at Palace. Maybe you think, well, could we have perhaps kept him? But there's like loads of them, isn't there? You know, you look at Livramento at Southampton, could have done with him right now. Look at Tarek Lamptey at Brighton, you know. I think the club did want to keep a fair few of these players, but ultimately these guys want to go and play football, and that's fair play to them. We have got obviously buyback options on the likes of Livramento, Tammy Abraham, who's having a fantastic season at Roma. Most goals in a debut season by anyone. I think he's got more than Batistuta, more than Vincenzo Montella as well. So he's having a great season out there. But
there's something in the water.
The academy is doing great, but it's great to see the young players coming through. But at the same time, it's easy money for the club to make. Like, you can produce a youngster at Cobham, and then they might not be good enough for the first team. You get 25-30 million for them from a decent Premier League team. So from a business perspective as well, it's also very good.
Alex, so I wanted to touch on briefly. We were touching a little there about performance and players and how businesses work. So I'd be interested to know from a TV presenting and a reporting point of view, how is your performance as a reporter assessed in a way? I'd be very interested to know how you get the performances, because we're all very quick to slate football players, and we know how their performance goes. It's very simple, but maybe it's not so much for you guys.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, George. And often I would say to the players, "You've done your job. I've let you do. Look, I've watched you do yours for 90 minutes. Now let me do mine. Now let me do a good job." Because as you say, we of course assessed on all our post-match interviews and what is the story. Working for the Premier League now, we get to choose who we speak to. So I think it's really, you have to really think carefully. Good talker versus what the story is and who scored the goals or whatever. Or if there's a controversial decision, who was brought down in the area and VAR didn't give the penalty, let's get him, let's talk to him. But it can be so frustrating. So just to tell a story, do you remember when Bale scored that ridiculous goal in Kiev? The bicycle kick in the Champions League final. So obviously it was crucial that I got a post-match interview with him, but he wouldn't speak. He wouldn't speak because he was too tired. He said he was too tired. But he'd come on as a substitute, and who knows why? Maybe it's because it was Club Channel and he wasn't particularly happy at Real Madrid at the time, but he wouldn't give me an interview. And I remember my boss saying, like, how have you not got an interview with Gareth Bale after he scored he'll never score a goal as good as that ever again. I said, trust me, I tried. And I asked him 3, 4, 5, 6 times, just constantly, and he just wouldn't give me an interview. And it's so frustrating evenings like that when you can't do your job properly. Ultimately, if the player doesn't say yes. And that's why it's so key to have good relationships. I didn't have a bad relationship with him at all, but it's so key to have good relationships with the players. I used to learn how to ask in their language for an interview. So I learned it in Croatian for Modric, German for Toni Kroos, because it sort of gets their attention. Or you say something to them like, Luca, an amazing performance tonight. And he's like, oh, cheers, thanks. 2 minutes. So like, start with the brilliant performance tonight. Luca, can we just talk about your goal? Can we talk about this? But yeah, it's how good an interview can get. You can ask the best questions in the world, or what you think are great questions. But if the player ultimately it doesn't want to give you a good interview, then you're not going to do a good job. Yeah, it's tricky, and you don't want to get your stats, facts, figures wrong. That can go very badly because most players know their numbers as well. So like, if you're not sure, just don't say it. Don't say 14 goals this season already, and then say no, it's 13. Just you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. But yeah.
Obviously, like in terms, obviously, there's kind of different types of interviews. Obviously, the ones straight after a game are going to be kind of a lot less, say, preparation as such, and there's only a limited amount of topics you can cover because it's what happened in the 90 minutes and etc. So they're probably a little bit easier to prepare for. But if you have like a sit-down interview with a player, obviously these players do a lot of interviews, and they get asked probably the same questions more often than not in virtually every interview. I mean, how do you make sure that when you get access to a player that they're not just going to be giving the same generic answers? Like, how do you make your interview stand out to all the others they would have given? Like, do you have to think of like different things to talk about, different questions to ask, or like make it fun in a certain way? I mean, what do you personally do to kind of make it stand out? Because these guys just do hundreds and hundreds of interviews, and obviously probably just get fed up answering the same questions, like you see when in press conferences with managers as well, etc. I mean, how important is it to develop a way of interviewing that makes you stand out?
Yeah, for sure. Because if you ask the same questions, you're just going to get the same answers. So we find out probably about a week before who we're going to interview. So I always just try and think, I do so much research on the player. Can I find out some weird things about his childhood, or just something weird, or that I can bring up with him that maybe he's never spoken about before, or maybe something a teammate has said about him that he might, or something. I'll just sort of explore the internet, just try and find out as much information as I can to think of some different kind of questions, and then, as you say, make it fun, games. But then it depends on the player as well. You have to sort of think, can you imagine him playing that game, or is he just not going to? Because the worst thing is trying to, I think I had once a player just moved to London. Okay, let's guess the London landmarks. Okay, what's this? And it was Big Ben or something. And he sat there like, I don't know. Okay, well, what's this? Tower Bridge or something. No, I've never seen that bridge in my life. Like, no idea. And then that's the worst, and you've wasted like 10 minutes of the interview. But I did with Jorginho and his mum this amazing interview a couple of weeks ago for International Women's Day. So we got ESPN Brazil to film his mum in her house in Brazil. We had Jorginho at the training ground with his mum on Skype, the laptop, and basically going through his childhood. So I was sat with Jorginho asking him to ask his mum specific questions. So I said, okay, now can you ask her about the time she left you at the airport to go to Italy on your own when you're 15 years old? Ask her about that. And he looked at me and he said, I've actually never asked her that. Like, I've never asked her to talk me through that moment. And his mum started crying. He started to cry. But it was amazing. It was such a powerful interview. It wasn't really an interview. It was more a conversation between them. And afterwards, we got feedback from the club saying he said it was one of the best interviews he'd ever done, and it felt like a therapy session for him. It was like therapy. He was asking his mum's things he'd never asked her before, even about her career. She was an amazing footballer. I said, can you ask her about her career? And he said, again, like, I've actually never asked her about her career, which is crazy. So she's talking about, it was really good. And it was just because it was a different idea. Something different like that, and the player actually loved it, and he wanted a copy of it, and his mum did too. So it's just thinking, it's actually quite a simple idea if you think about it. But then I guess it's having the player that wants to do that. I guess some players probably wouldn't want to get their mum involved, and then some players also don't have as dramatic a story as Jorginho's going alone at 15. He didn't even have any money to buy food, apparently. She just left him at the airport with not a penny in his pocket. So off you go, son. Good luck. Obviously not like that. Obviously, it was extremely sad, but she knew he was going to make it. She said she knew he was going to make it, and he had to go to Italy. So yeah, that was amazing, because it was just felt like something totally different. And I'm definitely going to try and do more things like that, because we're bored. People are bored of listening to the same old interviews, the same old answers, and actually content like that. People want to see more, I think.
In terms of those kind of ideas as well, I mean, do you obviously you find out kind of like a week before you're going to speak to someone? I mean, do you get, do you plan it all yourself, or do you get input from others? Do you have like a team that help you plan it? Do you have to kind of run your sort of, I guess, plan past someone else to okay it? What's kind of the process behind that?
Yeah, I write all the topics out, and then we send them to the club, and then the club will say, can you get rid of that, and that, depending. Or sometimes they say, yeah, all good, that's fine. Or so recently I went to Manchester United. I went to interview Edison Cavani, and so I prepped it all, but basically got there on the day. And I think we get requests as well from other people. So some also other broadcasters, because we go out to all the Premier League rights holders overseas. So they can send requests. Different channels can send me requests. And so I think there was quite a lot of questions about Cristiano Ronaldo in it. And I think they were sort of like, no, like, let's not make this about Cristiano. Let's make this about Cavani. Everyone talks about Cristiano Ronaldo. And actually, does Edison, it was his birthday. It's like, does he want to sit there talking about Cristiano Ronaldo? Probably not. So it's listening to the club. It's having your own ideas, listening to what the club want, sort of gauging the mood with the player as well on the day. Sometimes I'll change it when the player's actually in front of me, or when we go off on a tangent and something becomes more interesting that I didn't know about before. But then sometimes we get these sort of crazy requests from so NBC, it goes out in the morning. So it's like Premier League mornings. We have to say, like, what do you eat for breakfast? What would you put on porridge? We're told to ask things like this. And sometimes the players are okay with it, and sometimes they're not. Or we have to make them say Happy New Year in Chinese. Things like this, which it depends on the player. It depends on the player. And sometimes, again, you have to read the room and gauge the mood. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to ask this player to say Happy New Year in Chinese today.
I mean, just on that, do you find on the whole that from your experience that generally players are quite receptive in interviews? They're very open about it. They're kind of happy to do it. Do you get that feeling really?
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on the mood at the club at the time, and whether they're sat in front of you on the back of a 5-0 defeat or a 5-0 win. But I think in general, the players are all sort of, I think they enjoy the interviews, and they're not that long. That we get 10 minutes with them, so ultimately, it's 10 minutes of their day. Sometimes they can be 3 hours late. Sometimes the only player who's ever been early to an interview was Kepa, which is crazy because Spaniards are renowned for being always late. And he was there even before the press officer. And he was like, can we start? Can we go? And I was like, no, because the press officer has to sit in and they listen. And also, when it's in another language as well, that's quite tricky because the press officer doesn't understand. So they often get translators in who listen in. Not that they don't trust us, but they can flag something if they're not happy with it. Kai, that's another one. The other day after the Burnley game at Turkmore, he was in the interview room before anyone had even asked him to be there. The press officer wasn't even there. He was just sort of sat. He's a really funny character. He was just sort of sat in the corner, clearly waiting for me, but just put himself up for the interview. He did play well, to be fair, but yeah, it's a funny one with the players. But yeah, normally all good, and I always try and relax them before. The other day, I think it was Matty Cash at Leeds, Aston Villa, and I just said to him something like, I just noticed he wasn't even sweating. And he'd just played 90 minutes and he looked like he was just gone for a stroll. I said, how do you look like that? I'm dripping with sweat after a 10-minute run. How do you look like that after 90 minutes of football? And he really sort of laughed, but it just came out. It was just my normal chat. And then the whole interview, he was just relaxed and smiley and chatty. And I think it's just so important to just treat them like normal human beings. Ultimately, that's what they are. And not try and, I don't know, not treat them like, he's a professional footballer. Shouldn't say that, or shouldn't. Obviously, there are things you shouldn't say, but just comments like that, the mood, set the tone, and make them.
I want to ask you a topic that's quite highly related to asking people for interviews, because there's been a talk about referee being coming out and talking to the the reporters and the TV. Do you think we will ever see a situation where TV presenters can actually speak to the referees after the game? And think that would be a good idea?
What? Sorry, George, your mic was cutting out. What did you say?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, all good.
Yes, I was just asking. On your topic of interviewing players,
Mm-hmm.
a very hot at the moment is with referees and the constant frustration between broadcasting that goes up there and fans who want answers for those key decisions that you always turn after games. Do you ever see a situation where presenters and broadcasters will be able to speak to referees after the game? And do you think that would be an idea?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think also it would be a very good idea when there's controversial decisions, VR decisions. At the moment, what we have in our Matchday Live studio is access to the former Premier League referee Dermot Gallagher. So he's sat upstairs. They connect straight to him, and they say, "Right, what's your take on that?" And obviously, he's able to do that now because he's not working anymore. So they ask him his opinion, and I reckon that's the closest thing, right, to what you're saying now. But yeah, I think it's a really good idea because we always ask the managers or the players about the decisions, and ultimately you have to ask the referee is the one that can properly answer those questions. And so instead of the speculation and instead of a manager ranting about how unfair it was, or a player saying he was pulling my shirt off, that who was it I had the other day? It was a Newcastle Jacob Murphy. Was it when he was Trevor Chalobah was pulling his shirt off? Yeah. And I asked him about it. He was pulling my shirt off. He was literally pulling my shirt off. But then actually, how much better if I could have had the referee in front of me and said, look, or I could even have said it, look, Jacob said he was pulling his shirt off. How did you see it? And why did you come to that decision? But I think we're a long way from having that. I don't think, well, who knows? But I don't think that's going to be that. I don't think it's possible. Well, maybe it is.
No, well, I'd like to think it is. I'm not saying. Look, referees get a lot of stick, and some of it's unjustified, and some of it potentially might be justified, or football is very emotional. But for me, as you say, managers have to front up for decisions they've done or tactics that have or haven't worked. Players have to come out after a game if they played really badly or their team's lost or whatever. So why should referees not have to come and speak about their performance after a game? For me, it doesn't make sense. Everyone else, every other aspect of football is open for interpretation. You expect access to managers, players, etc. They have to come and face the media in difficult times. If you're a referee, just come out and explain why you've made that decision, how you've come to it, and then we can all move on, rather than they just kind of seem to get away with it, and then that animosity tends to build up between fans and referees. I think there'd be a lot more respect between referees and fans if referees just came out and explained, okay, I arrived at this decision for XYZ reason. This is what I saw, and this is why I gave the decision. You can maybe still slightly disagree with it, but at least you've got an explanation as to why, and then you can move on. Or having access to the VAR conversation, because at the moment, as a fan, as a consumer, all right, it goes to VAR. You're just sat, if you're at the game, you're sat in a stadium, and you've got no idea what that conversation is. So even because I know rugby, you get a bit of that conversation with the video ref and the actual on-field ref. Even if you could just get a bit of that, just a bit more access and involving the fans more in the decision-making process, because at the moment it feels very separate and very alienated.
But imagine bringing the ref out to where we do the pitch side interviews at the moment.
Yeah.
COVID. Imagine that would be a disaster. I think the ref interview would have to be done in a room inside probably. But Charlie, you do make a good point by saying actually maybe it would improve the relationship between the fans and the referees as well. I like the idea of being able to hear. That's why I love. I love watching rugby, but I love being able to hear what's going on. So maybe that would be, yeah. But I guess the language, right? That's the issue.
Yeah.
Constantly it would be, sorry you just heard, sorry have you heard anything. Well, yeah, I don't know, it's definitely a good idea, but I reckon it's difficult. It would be difficult.
Alex, as we come towards the close on our episodes, we like to ask our guests what gives you the drive and the buzz in your particular line of work, because you've been to so many incredible players, seen so many amazing footballing moments, and all interviewed some of the best and biggest players in world football. I mean, what is it? Isn't it a common all of those things, or is there a particular one thing you can put your hat on and say, yeah, I love being at that ground, or I love the bit up, or particular, I love the conversation part? I mean, what is it you?
I think the buzz of live television is amazing. And also the fact that every day waking up is different and you never know what's going to happen that day, really. There's always different things going on. And since I've started this career, no day has been the same, which I think makes me so lucky, because how many people just do the same thing day in, day out, and just meeting amazing people as well. So many different types of people, all different backgrounds, cultures, and yeah, it's incredible. And I love being at the games, of course, but just everything. I love interviewing the players. I love traveling. I love seeing new grounds for the first time. I've saw Ellen Road. I've never been to Ellen Road. Went there a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, I think just the fact that every day is different, and the buzz of the live TV. But obviously with that live TV, when things go wrong, you have to accept that in telly, nothing's perfect. So a former boss once said to me, aim for excellent, not perfection, because perfection in live TV just doesn't exist. And yeah, breaking news as well is amazing when they're telling us in our ear something. It's like, let's say Jose's just been sacked. That's cool. I was at Chelsea TV when the day Jose was sacked, and things like that. And I was also working the day the football was postponed for COVID for the first time, and we didn't really know what was going on. So they're telling us in our earpieces, right, okay, 2 weeks, it's being postponed. And we're thinking, it's the virus, everything's shutting down. They're telling us, and we've got it. You have to just maintain that composure and tell our viewers, right, okay, we've got some news to bring you now. There's going to be no football for the next 2 weeks because of the virus. But we're not really knowing what's going on, but you just have to sort of deliver it in this coherent, like, everything is fine. Everything is under control. It's exciting. Oh, that wasn't exciting. Obviously not. But live TV is exciting. And I think the main thing is also just to try and be yourself as much as possible. And so you basically day-to-day basis, just trying to be myself, enjoying myself, and yeah, having fun. It's a lot of fun. It's football. I did a work placement at Sky News on Sunrise, so working night shifts, sort of these really hard news stories and shootings and bombings, and of course, like, you switch the news on, it's depressing. It's so depressing. And I just feel lucky that in football, okay, depressing things happen, bad things happen, but the majority of the time, it's light, right? Reporting about football, it's fun, and there are great stories, and it's most of it's positive, right? Of course, we have negative stories to cover as well, and it's important that we do cover them. But on a day-to-day basis, it's positive, it's fun, it's great.
So to very quickly finish with a couple of just quick fire questions that have come in, just very quick answers. In your opinion, will Brentford stay up?
Yes. Ericsson will keep them up.
Yeah, Ericsson's going to keep them up.
Yeah. I think they will. They'll definitely stay up.
And what other ones? Let's have a quick look. Favorite player that you've interviewed so far? I say favorite's quite hard, but is there one that particularly stands out that you perhaps really look forward to, or is there kind of you love them all?
And I'm not just saying because it's Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah.
It absolutely is him, because he never said no. The whole time I was working there, no matter it was 2, 3 in the morning, just got off the plane, always said yes. Never once said no, and always gave you a line. There was always a line in that interview that was like a headline, if that makes sense. There was always a line that you could lead with the next day. Just because he's a true professional. So, Cristiano.
Yeah, I think he gets a little bit of an unfair
Really
kind
does.
of reputation. I think people sort of, not very many people actually know him that well or have had the honour to spend a lot of time with him. And you know, I think he just gets an unfair rep as like, you know.
And it's so true what everyone says about him arriving. He was always first out, always lead the players out to training, always stay out late, day in, day out, day in, day out. And obviously, like, just everything about him is just a professional. What he eats, how much he trains, and yeah, I think compare him to Gareth Bale. Obviously, I'm not going to say horrible things about Gareth Bale. There's quite a big comparison. Gareth Bale, it was tough for him. He just didn't buy into the whole Spanish lifestyle. So he didn't really stay at the training ground, have lunch with players. He wouldn't go out for dinner. They would have team dinners at sort of 10, 11 at night. And he's like, nah, not for me. Sorry, but I'm in bed by then. But I think I didn't like eating 10 or 11 when I was living in Spain. You have to also understand that you're living in Spain. You're the one that's chosen to live there. And if you want to go and eat with your friends, that's what time they'll be eating. So I think it's sort of, you have to make the effort as well when these players go abroad and learn the language as well. If you can't speak,
you have to.
And you know, Mark Cucurella at Brighton. So he arrives in this summer, season, and didn't say a single word. So his first interview with Spanish, and about a couple of months ago, he did a 15-minute sit-down interview in English. So it shows it's possible, and that's in a few months. He says 3 lessons a week, 3 2-hour lessons a week, and they do have time. They do have time.
You have to immerse yourself in the culture. Like, you know, you can't go to another country and not immerse yourself in the culture, not at least try to learn the language on a level where you can kind of communicate on a daily basis. And I don't want to sound like being a bit critical, but it very much does tend to be when British players go abroad, they don't tend to immerse themselves into the culture or make the effort to learn the language, and they often become alienated. And Gareth Bale has done exceptionally well at Real Madrid. All right, last few years it's not been great. You know, I think it's quite clear that he doesn't want to be there, doesn't enjoy it or whatever. But yeah, you just have to immerse yourself in the culture. And that's what I was delighted to see when obviously wasn't delighted to see Tomori leave Chelsea, but the other day after Milan beat Napoli 1-0 away, he did an interview and he did it in Italian. All right, it wasn't like perfect, but the fact that it was pretty good.
Yeah.
The fact that he's a young lad, he's gone over to Italy. You know, he doesn't know the country, doesn't know the culture, doesn't know the language, and the fact that he's actually taken the time and the effort to learn the language and speak in Italian after a massive game is, I think it's just it's the right way to go about things, and it will take you a long way.
Absolutely, it helps the manager as well, because Zidane doesn't speak a word of English, so communication between Zidane and Bale sort of existent, really. So
I like the ones that I've seen that one from Joey Barton when he tries to put a French accent in English. Anyone seen that one?
I haven't seen that.
Steve McLaren. Steve McLaren has tried to do a bit of a Dutch accent. That's just that cracks every time we just discuss it like that. Sorry.
So many languages they don't all fit on the UEFA form. You know, when they say what languages they speak, because he speaks 9. And Kovacic speaks 5 or 6. Crazy.
It is crazy. I'd love to be able to just speak one. Honest, I can get English right. I know you're pressed for time, but I've got one more question, which is next for Alex Aljoe. That's a pretty open-ended question, I suppose.
What question?
What's for Alex Aljoe in terms of
what's next?
What's your aspiration? Yeah, very open-ended, isn't it? Good
question. So I've never worked at a Euros or a World Cup. So the dream is to be at Qatar in November, December, some winter sunshine. That would be absolutely unbelievable. But I think with this career, you just sort of have to take, I know it's so cliche, but take each day and don't think too far ahead. Don't try and think, oh, she's doing this. Oh, I wish I was doing that. And don't compare yourself to other people, because everyone's going to get breaks, different breaks at different times. And I think the main thing is just stay focused on what you're doing and just see where it takes you. Just work hard. So hopefully I'll get more and more opportunities. But I try not to compare. I think it's obviously such a competitive industry, cutthroat. There's a lot of big personalities, and I don't actually like that side of it at all. I am competitive, of course. I want to do well, but I don't think that there's no good to start thinking, oh, she's doing that. That sounds that, or I should do that. Oh, I'm way better suited to do that. Just focus, do what you love, and enjoy it, and see where it takes you. But yeah, tough. Fingers crossed.
Very positive. What a tagline to end. Perhaps maybe Alex Aljoe and interviews World Cup winning team for England. How about that?
There we go.
You never know. Come on. Listen, full time on another episode of this Brothers podcast. Thank you as always to my co-host Charlie Patrick. Pleasure. And thank you to our special guest this evening, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I know your time is very precious, but I hope that the fans love it. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Enjoyed it very much. See you guys soon.